7 o'clock, so we'll call this meeting of the Garfield Township Planning Commission to order. First order of business is we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
John or Steve, somebody going to do a roll call of the board?
I'll do that. Augustinelli?
Here.
Klein?
Here.
DeGood? Here. McManus?
Here.
Robertson?
Here.
Fudge?
Here.
Racine?
Here. Next on the agenda is our first of two public comment periods. If anybody from the public has anything they want to tell us, you're free to come to the microphone, state your name, and tell us what you want to tell us. And the same opportunity will be made available at the end of the meeting. So if anybody would like to, I'm seeing no indication that anybody in the public wants to come forward, so we'll move along on the agenda. And the next item is a review and approval of the agenda. If anybody has a conflict of interest, we should hear about that now, and if not, we will need a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Support.
Any discussion on that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Next is a review of our minutes from the May 10th meeting of the Planning Commission. Does anybody have any suggested changes or modifications to those?
I make a motion we approve the minutes from the May 10th, 2023 regular meeting.
Is there support?
Support.
Any further discussion on that? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Next on the agenda is correspondence. John, you want to tell us what sort of correspondence we got?
So in your packet, there's a couple items. There's staff response to the Watershed Center, plus there's a notice from Green Lake Township regarding a zoning change. And there's an item on your desk which I will cover under staff report.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is reports. Molly, any township board report this evening?
Yeah, the town board is looking at water study. Gordy Frazier is doing it, of all of our water system and where we need upgrades and what the timeline might be for those and where we might be able to find funding. So that'll be interesting to us.
Yeah, for everybody. Thanks.
Yeah.
Planning commissioners, Bob, any ZBA report?
No meeting, thank you.
Okay. Chris, how about Parks and Rec?
I don't know. I don't think we have anything to report from Parks and Rec.
All right. And Joe, I don't think we've had any joint planning commission meetings
No,
since
next
the
one's
last
in
time.
July.
All right. John or Steve, any staff report?
I just want to point out on your desk, I know there's a couple of tables. This is data. It's a lot there. You don't need necessarily to understand what you're looking at right at the moment, but every year the Census Bureau issues population estimates. So some of the data that came out this month, they start off with the beginning of the year's states in the nation typically happen around the first of the year. Then in about March they do counties, and then in May they do all the local units of government. So I just wanted to point out a couple interesting things. Actually, the bottom graph first shows highlights Garfield Township, but shows all the other townships in the city and villages in Grand Traverse County. And it shows in 2020 what our census count was. April 1, 2020, we were at 19,499. And as of July 1st of last year, 2022, the Census Bureau estimated us to be at 20,111, so that's a change of 612, or roughly about 3%. So it calculates to roughly about half of the population growth in Grand Traverse County occurred in Garfield Township, based on the actual count, because the county increased about 1,200 people during that 2-year period. And then the table on top of that is showing the top 20 units of government. They're ranked, ordered by, in Michigan, these are cities and townships. Townships would include village if there's a village in the township. But this is ranked ordered by total population count change between April 1st, 2020 and July 2022. And what it shows is the Garfield Townships, it was the 9th highest in the state in terms of population growth. As a whole, Michigan is not really doing well on the population spectrum. When you look at other states in the country, we're holding our own, roughly about 10 million. And so Michigan as a whole is not growing. We're probably one of the bright spots, as well as some of these others that you can see, which are mostly in southeast Michigan and the Grand Rapids area. So these estimates aren't anything we have already suspected this. We've done some of our own data estimates based on building permits. You know, the Planning Commission has approved a lot of dwelling units, particularly senior living and multifamily dwelling units over the last couple of years, and those haven't come online yet, so those will be adding to these numbers. The census, just for your information, how they calculate these are on birth and death certificates and tax returns. So it's just another tool for us to kind of gauge what's happening in the township, and probably validates what we all kind of see around us and happening in the township.
Thanks, John. Anybody have any questions of John about any of that stuff? If not, we'll move along. Under unfinished business, item 6A is Planning Department Report 2023-59. We're going to talk about the master plan update, and tonight we're going to talk about transportation and infrastructure.
Yeah, so we're going to go through this. We have some maps that go along with the text. And again, what we're going through is different chapters of the master plan. So tonight we're talking about transportation and infrastructure. And when we talk about transportation, there's a lot of jurisdictions in the county that provide transportation. We have surface road transportation, like MDOT is providing state highways. We have county roads and streets. We have a lot of private streets. When you think of condominiums, site condominiums, those are private streets. We have bike paths that are owned. A lot of those are private owners. In some cases, they're public. We have sidewalks. We have transit is a provider of transportation. We have railroad with MDOT Rail and the Great Lakes Railroad that's provided in service into our area. We have Cherry Capital Airport. So those are a lot of the different modes of transportation and the different services that are provided. But what we're mostly going to focus on is primarily the roads and the pathways, because those have a direct interface when we look at land use. So while the master plan is focused on land use, and that's what's under the purview of the township through its ability to establish a master plan and do zoning, we do, I think, in the way the Planning Enabling Act does allow us to talk about these other modes of transportation, because they're an important interface. There's a certain relationship between transportation and land use, and also the Planning Enabling Act allows communities to kind of set a full vision to take in. So even though we may not be building homes or building roads as Garfield Township, those do have an impact in terms of what is the overall vision of the township. So we're going to look at transportation from that standpoint. From the infrastructure aspect, it's mainly to focus on municipal water and sewer, which the township has its water system and its sanitary sewer system. We also have stormwater systems. In Garfield Township, we require stormwater to be managed on site. So we don't, in Many cities, particularly older cities, they have systems, storm sewer systems that are throughout the street system. In Garfield, we have a little bit of that. It's pretty limited to some of the county roads and state highway, but by and large, most of all stormwater is managed through private property ownership and is regulated through the township's stormwater ordinance. And then we also have drains. We have a small number of drains in Grand Traverse County that are under the jurisdiction of the Drain Commissioner in terms of managing those districts. Those are actually, again, contributions by private owners that are assessed the fees to maintain those systems, to protect property, roadways, buildings, et cetera. So when we talk about infrastructure, probably the main two are water and sewer, with some extent to stormwater as well. So what we wanted to do is kind of go through these draft statements that we have, this kind of the introduction to the transportation and infrastructure. It's just got a few short paragraphs. I'm not going to go through those, but those basically summarize what we have. A lot more of the data and information that's in the existing conditions report. That's where it really goes into great length, talks about our streets, our roads, our non-motorized system, how stormwater is managed, our water system, sewer system, et cetera. So this is the piece that would be going into the master plan. All those existing conditions material, again, would be part of the appendix. So what I'd like to do is kind of go through these goals and objectives. And in some of our chapters, we'll have just a simple goal with a few objectives that follow with it. But because this is really kind of looking at 4 different areas, we want to start off with streets and roads. So the goal is to support the improvement, maintenance, and connectivity of streets and roads. And a couple maps I want to point out to you. First is one that previously in the master plan, it really identified roads as major thoroughfares or minor thoroughfares. Used arterial as a terminology and so forth. And what we want to move towards is what really is recognized by the road agencies like MDOT and the Road Commission is the National Functional Classification System. So this is really the important part of how all the road agencies throughout the state, or as well as the country, follow this system. And these classifications require, these are identified through the state of Michigan and the Road Commission working with them in terms of, these are really important because the types of road get certain types of funding and so forth. So what you don't see on there as well, you see the bold colored ones of the different, whether it's a other principal arterial, minor arterial, major collector, minor collector, and then the local roads and the private roads are the ones that are kind of the much smaller ones that are on there. So when we look at how projects are accomplished by the Road Commission, a lot of these depending on that classification of what funds can go forward with them. One of them that I think it's probably going to be changed, I think, is Frankie Road. That is now, I believe, considered a minor collector. It just hasn't shown up on the, we got this off the MDOT website right now. So, but that'll be, again, this is important for them in terms of identifying the level of service that's provided, how the infrastructure or the roadway is improved and so forth.
John, may I ask, who determines which is a principal arterial, which is a minor? That's not something that the township has determined, is it?
No, it's not. It's this, I believe it's the state of Michigan, but it's also related back to federal aid. So I believe.
I think also, does Road Commission do any of it as well? And there's also ways for like either the road commission or localities to, based on traffic count, like apply to upgrade one of the roads. Frankie, I think, was going to reach that threshold.
Right, and actually, I think Lafreniere was considered a local road up until recently. I think that was one of the challenges of when they went through and they adjusted the hill, and then they put it into 3 lanes all the way through. I believe it had to require reclassification to a minor collector so that it could provide the aid in monies appropriated for that. But it's the road commission working in tandem with the state of Michigan. And part of this also is related back to the federal aid that comes into the county and how that can be appropriated to these. So for instance, federal aid cannot be applied to like local streets. Has to be one of these classifications.
So could we conceivably have any influence if we wanted to try to get one of these colors changed for purposes of securing more funding for that particular road? Is that something we could have any voice in or not?
I don't know. I think there's certain qualifiers for that, and I'm not sure, but we could look into that. I do know there's a balance of, how many roads to put into the system. I know that's one of the concerns of the road commission is how many local roads they have versus roads that are in the national functional classification.
Yeah, the determinations are made by the road commission, but the final decision comes from MDOT.
Okay.
The road commission puts all their documentation together and says, we want this to be whatever, but MDOT's got to sign off on it, because that, like you say, influences the amount of money they get back for them. Each classification gets a different amount of money.
So if we saw, like the example that John just mentioned, Frankie Road might be needing more repair. If we felt that it did, could we lobby the road commission, who could lobby MDOT to try to
Well, if you're
upgrade
looking
it?
for repair work, the road commission's as far as you gotta go, because the road commission is responsible for the maintenance.
But would they get more money from MDOT if it had a different color attributed to it, perhaps?
Oh,
No.
because that just goes into a kitty that comes to the road commission. The road commission decides how to divvy it up. It just has to stay in the classification it's set in.
Okay, thanks.
So I think this is when we reference in our zoning ordinance, we did already make some of the changes previously because we wanted to move away from our own definitions of major thoroughfare and really align ourselves to how these are identified by the transportation agencies. We did that when we went through Articles 2 and 3 because there was definitions for those, and we inserted the national functional classification system. So this will support how we view these, and this will be obviously something that needs to be, while it might be in the plan, is really updated, not from us, but from those transportation agencies. The one thing that we did want to talk about, though, when it comes to some of the objectives that we have in the transportation system, kind of goals and objectives, is we talk about connectivity. And what we did want to highlight is some areas that we thought were important in terms of making some connections, future connections, potential road connections within Garfield Township. So we identified about 13 locations, at least initially here. Now, again, some of these might be, in many cases, these might be public roads, but they could be private roads as well. So we're looking at where do we see, a possible need to connect. So the number one we put in there is the Hartman-Hammond Bridge. We know that's already going forward with what the road commission is doing, but we think it's important to identify that we'd like to see that connection happen in Garfield Township at some point in the future. We listed some other ones. One of the ones we listed in here is number 2 is if you go over off of Lafreniere, there's the entrance over there by the health department, at the county health department, which goes into that property that is mainly the county's property, but we've looked at that as, maybe that could be a potential connection ultimately going all the way over to Garfield. So it gives another connection, particularly when we see all the number of residential dwelling units along Lafreniere Road could potentially give another access point over to Garfield. The more connectivity that we have helps to alleviate some of the congestion that we have. And that potentially, it's not to say it's going to happen, but it's to say this is something that might be worthy to investigate. We also have there, number 3 is when we look at the property behind Sam's Club, there's roughly about 200 acres that's actually for sale right now. There's also potential property farther west of that towards East Silver Lake Road. We thought maybe there could be at some point a connection from South Airport down through that property and connecting at some point east-west. This has been in previous plans by the township, but as Hartman extends over to 31, maybe there could potentially be a connection to East Silver Lake. Maybe the connection to Silver Pines would be sufficient, but we do know if that area is to be developed, which right now it's zoned R1 and it's currently planned for low-density residential, 1 to 3 units an acre, that having some of that connectivity could really provide greater options to how that traffic is dispersed in the community. I do know right now the Road Commission is looking at West-South Airport Road and how that turns onto Silver Lake Road. They're going to be adding some turn lanes in there because that's kind of a congestion point there. And actually, the way we have it laid out here, that point that would come to East Silver Lake Road would be right across from where the fire station is on East Silver Lake Road. So potential where the fire station could get easy access to 31 or potentially South Airport. Again, very high-level concept, just throwing this out there as these are ideas that if we are going to develop, we create these connections and give people other options. 5 and 6 we've looked at those earlier this year when we looked at the conceptual plan for the Olson property, a public road connection between Rennie School and Meadow Lane to the north, a Blue Star coming across that property and connecting. That would be a private road. The connection to Meadow Lane, between Meadow Lane and Rennie School, could potentially be a public road, or it could be a private road. We put in there the Lowe's to the Grand Traverse Mall connection. Now, again, that would be most likely private streets through there, but we still think that's important to identify as a potential connection. 8 is actually within the commons. It's a little bit complicated to just see that little piece and wondering what that is, but basically if you were to drive along Silver Drive there, if you're going kind of by the east side of the ISD and you wanted to get back to where Red Drive is, where the trailhead is, kind of for the Commons Natural Area by Greenspire, you have to go up through Brown Drive and come back. So there was a concept that has been thrown out there. It's called Purple Drive, and that connects Silver and Red, kind of basically along the north side of the ISD. Now, there's challenges to that, mainly cost and who's going to build that and so forth. But that could provide a little bit better connection and relieve some of the congestion that's already there between the ISD and Greenspire School and so forth. 9 and 10 is getting to that area at the end of Zimmerman Road. We know there's a plan ultimately to connect Zimmerman up to Harris, so we put that on there's number 9. We also thought at some point maybe there would be a connection if you were to extend Barnes over to Zimmerman. Not to say that would happen, but we have looked at different development concepts that people have brought in for those areas in terms of development. Maybe there could be a connection there. 11, if you recall, looking at Hickory Hills and the ski lodge and so forth, and some of the issues related to that was along Randolph, is that Randolph Street?
Yeah,
Randolph.
Hickory Hills is Randolph.
Maybe there's another route. I know it's challenging to get out to Barney, but that might still happen someday, some way. I don't know. it would be helpful to have an extra connection through there. Not necessarily connecting, let's say, Barney Road to Randolph, but at least Hickory Hills would have another entry point. And then we've been looking around that area where Cedar Run and West Front Street. If we were to extend West Royal Drive over to West Front Street, that might create some connection there. Some of that is predicated on some of the existing land use in there. You have the concrete service and everything that's in there, but also maybe there could be another way back into Munson at some point out onto West Front, again, giving people relief and options. So these are just potential road connections for the future. It gives us some thought. There may be some others, but these are some of the ones that we kind of came up with.
I think it makes sense to have something like this in the plan. It's maybe just a dream, but at least it's putting developers on notice. If they come to us with a project, we could point to something like this and say, we're thinking about roads here, what do you think about that? And similarly, if, I suspect the average property purchaser isn't looking at this kind of detail, but if they wanted to, they might see, oh, I see somebody's got an idea of putting a road here someday, and maybe that's food for thought. Is this map referenced somewhere in the text, or?
We haven't yet, because we just kind of presented this to you as, see what your thoughts are about having this kind of component in here, but we would reference it in there. I think we talk about just basically as an objective, improving the road network connectivity and through development and site condominium review. It's not specifically listed in there, but that's something that we would.
What do you folks think of that?
I think it helps to tell people what we've been thinking about and what we're talking about. I don't know if it'll change anything in the developer's mind, but they at least know that we've looked at it.
Well, would a developer, like buying that parcel behind Sam's, would they be required if they wanted to change, if they came to us for a permit, or what would it be? Like building a subdivision, they'd come for a use permit. So would they be required, if this is in our documents, would they be required to provide that road then for us to change their zoning?
Not necessarily.
Change their use?
I guess it depends, first of all, what they would be going through in terms of, for instance, when Meadow Valley, which was presented to you as Oakleaf, when they came in as a PUD, I think that was one of the things that we looked at is there a connection between some subdivisions and so forth. So as that part of that PUD process, there's typically some give and take. The township kind of gives on the land use, the density and so forth, with the idea that we get some public benefit back. And that's something that, traditionally the PUD has been really focused on open space and so forth, but I think really the intent there is also, is there some type of a public benefit? So it could be something that could be kind of negotiated or talked if they were going through the PUD process. Now, if it was going as a site condominium, it's currently zoned R1 and they did that, I don't know if we would have the leverage to do that. We would say, we'd like to see this, but I don't think we could require it. The PUD kind of gives us that ability to kind of discuss that with them.
So it wouldn't fall back like our sidewalk ordinance where they're required to put a sidewalk if they're gonna do something. But this would just be, we're suggesting they do it, but we couldn't force them to.
Right.
And then as far as the other, when you, like that number 4 coming through there, or 3, have you looked at the wetlands? Could that realistically go through, there's some wet holes in there, and they're quite big, but have you compared that to one of our wetland maps?
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest challenges is obviously with McCray Hill in there. And we don't know if that's really going to be feasible. We haven't looked that close. I mean, we've definitely looked in that particular area. It's got a lot of challenges. And of course, we don't know where Hartman's going to come out, or the new alignment out to 31. The Road Commission has indicated that they should probably have that determined by the end of this year, so that will give us some sense of what that's going to look at. And it doesn't automatically have to align. It could be if there's maybe a way out there and it gives some added connection. I think the thought was there where number 3 is located, if that area were to be developed, it would be nice to have some type of connection towards US 31, even if
Sure.
it's just to McCray Hill.
And that's where the wetlands are gonna be, those down there by
Yeah.
that McCray, the old McCray Hill Road. But anyway, if this is on here, it should help a little bit. That's always a big problem with the public getting through wetlands. They don't like that idea, and, but if we have it drawn as an alternate, or as a route, sometimes that'll help, I guess, won't it? I mean, getting permitting and stuff to actually go through
Well,
wetlands.
I think it's just identifying that we would like to see some connection through there. And it may come out to where it's not feasible, but maybe it could be looked at and maybe there is something through there. I don't know.
In the master plan, these sorts of things are more like bubble drawings, aren't they?
Right.
It's not a precise, it's like a zoning map where the street lines are critically important. And here it's sort of we're talking generalities, I think. And I don't remember the details, but didn't we sort of accomplish something like that when Brookside went in up there at North Long Lake and at Zimmerman got extended? I think there was probably a combination of people involved in that, but I think the Brookside property owner offered probably some land to be made into Zimmerman Road's extension, and Road Commission did something, and
Yeah, I believe that's my understanding when
there was a combination of
I
things.
think it was.
before my time, but that was a PUD that went in there, so it was obviously something that looked like it was probably negotiated and determined to extend that.
But then once something like that's in place, like when Harris Hills came through, was not a PUD, but it was understood that that's going to
talked about
continue.
that, yeah.
And so even just sort of indicating intent to connect certain roads, like if someone developed only a portion and it wasn't quite sure, ensuring that we have like stub connections, which has sometimes been a point of contention with developers, or at least a point of question, knowing that we want to, which does tie back to our ordinance, having connectivity between streets, just enforcing that. This could be a tool, and I agree, it should be more of a bubble drawing. There's probably a setting in GIS you can turn on for making this a little more kind of a bubble, but to show just that intent that we want that connectivity shows that, because adding more development to some of these existing roads would heavily tax the existing roads if there wasn't other connections going on.
Maybe there could be some reference right in the text to this sort of attachment,
Yeah.
and maybe it could be clearly indicated in the text. This is not meant to be a precision drawing of a location, it's just conceptually in that vicinity, we'd like to potentially see something happen.
That would be really good.
I look
A
at
lot of
this,
back doors there, but
I look at this map as kind of a companion to the future land use map. So when we look at the future land use map, it's talking about here's where we'd like to see development happen in the future, hasn't there? This kind of coincides, future land use, future connections, what is the potential, so that as, you know, I think it would be prudent on us if we're going to, let's say, if we're looking at the area behind Sam's Club there to, if that's kind of planned for single-family residential development, we should be thinking, how does that work into the system? I mean, certainly we can kind of rely on the road commission. They will certainly be our partner, but I think it's also helpful for us to say, this is how we think it might work. They're ultimately going to determine how it will in terms of design and so forth, but at least from a conceptual standpoint, I think it relates back to that future land use.
If we had any more conversation with the road commission, they were gonna get that, or look into that, no trucks on Silver Pines, and I see them signs are still up, and I just wonder if we, what we'd have to do to that one and the Hoke Road ones. That, we're looking here, we wanna build new roads, because we don't have enough, and now they're shutting down our roads we have. Unless they have a good reason for it, but when he was here, he didn't really know of any reason that he had for it to speak of.
Yeah.
I did want to follow up with Road Commission on that, and even just the data, what are our current all-season roads, which could tie to future land use, if we have like industrial, or even up in, we talked with the Olson Foundation, putting industrial on the back of there as a concept, but if there's gonna be roads, they might need to be all-season roads. But what's happening with, what were the two, Silver Pines and?
Silver Pines and Hoke.
And Hoke?
Yeah.
And then, now that you brought that up,
Yeah.
it's funny that so our classification that we were on last, Zimmerman Road, for instance, is yellow, so it's just a minor collector. But yet, that's an all-season road, and then West Silver Lake Road, all the way in, that's your green one, that's a minor, and that's not a seasonal road, so they have their seasonal roads on a yellow in that one instance, and they don't have the greens, and that's, if they actually come up with that, that's kind of, it don't make sense, I mean, if they're, how they come up with that.
Yeah, yeah, we were kind of puzzled as well about the Zimmerman one, because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of difference between that, but again,
Right.
I don't know the rationale behind it.
And then you go back, and it's not anything for us to worry about here, but on Long Lake, they have it's East Long Lake Road. It's like from Secor all the way over to North Long Lake Road, it's okay, it's seasonal, but it don't get you anywhere. It's just that one distance.
Yeah.
It's odd that if you look at that comes off the road commission's website on the season, for the frost laws or the seasonal road permit.
Okay.
Anyways, it's odd how that all works.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this little map and potential for road connections?
Just some of the impact, some of the objectives that we have listed there under streets and roads is planning for land uses within corridors by orientating buildings toward the road, keeping parking areas to the rear. So what's that pattern? We talk about cross-access. We require traffic impact reports to address land use development impact on roads and streets. We support street and road designs consistent with the character of the community, improve road network connectivity, plan for the Hartman-Hammond corridor crossing of the river. One of the things I know the Planning Commission has always been very active on is access management, so placement of driveways, cross-access, and so forth. And we talk about coordinating some of that with the Road Commission. I know the Road Commission, when they did their east-west study just a few years ago, one of the #1 implementation recommendations was access management. But I don't know if we've really gotten to the level of access management that really starts to make some change. I think we do it on our new developments in terms of where driveway placements are, but I think we can also start looking at some of our existing corridors where we have driveways and see if we can alter those. And one of the areas, and I have Steve kind of go through what we've kind of just drafted in concept, and we've been wanting to actually walk this portion of South Airport Road between Lafreniere and Garfield to kind of talk about that area, because it's kind of a congested area. There's a lot of driveways, but there's been some changes when we look at the Shell station. And Steve, you can probably kind of go through this, but
Yeah, that's the kind of most recent example. So this is that true north at Lafreniere and South Airport. Oh, yeah, if you want to. Yep. And you can see the new piece of sidewalk. When that went in, they moved their store up into the strip mall building, made a bigger canopy, but also as part of that, they consolidated some driveways. There used to be one here because there used to be two right next to each other. So that was consolidated into one, and then they moved the one on Lafreniere to consolidate to this one. There used to be one here as well. If there was an older aerial on here, that would show that as well. So what we wanted to attempt to just, as a kind of thought exercise, again, this is a very thought exercise, no concrete plans or anything in place, but just to kind of scope out what would it be like to consolidate more driveways, be able to put in sidewalk consistently, just kind of scope out what would it look like if there was good cross-access sidewalk and driveway consolidation on the stretch. Knowing South Airport, not to pick on it, but of all the streets in the township, when you're driving down that street, that seems to have the most high density, high concentration of driveway entrances. If you've tried to get in or out of some of those sites, it can sometimes be a challenge at peak hours. So we wanted to take a stab at looking what this might look like. These are parcel lines on here, by the way. So this is what currently South Airport at Lafrenia looks like. This is what we drew up to try to draw it with consolidated entrances, to align them so that they're as much as possible across the road from each other, to put in sidewalks, to put entrances, sidewalk to the entrance from the sidewalk, a little walkway connector, and then to do cross-access as much as possible as well. And then also it creates opportunities to do median islands, which right now are probably not even feasible as a traffic calming feature. But if that's something we wanted to indicate in talking with the road commission, like would they be interested in doing it right now, it's probably not even feasible. So sort of the middle section, in between, this is Woodward, this is the building with Jimmy John's, Family Video, Qdoba.
Next one over. The
and-
green roof is the,
Oh, that's the next one? Oh, and then
Yeah.
this is Big Lots, you're right. Yeah, this is the start of Cherryland Center on this stretch of South Airport. And that's what that's what it looks like in this concept. And then the section over towards Garfield Road, and with the concept on it. This aerial came before Bigby went in, which they did add their piece of sidewalk, and Seven Brews under construction right now, they're adding their piece of sidewalk. So even as we've reviewed some of these new developments, some of these things have actually been put in place. And Cherryland itself already had the cross-access and access management. If you remember all of the things we reviewed at Cherryland, no new curb cuts added along either South Airport or Garfield. So especially on this end, it was sort of, what does this look like if we extended that? And actually the ones across from Cherryland, we just used the same access points that Cherryland already has as a concept. So again, very conceptual, has not really been vetted to anyone else, but we wanted to just throw it out there as an idea and see what plan commissioners had to say about it.
If you wanna come up with something where driveways have to be opposite each other on opposite sides of the road, you're not gonna be very friendly,
Right.
because that limits
Mm-hmm.
the developer's ability to put things on his property.
Mm-hmm.
Because if his design doesn't fit the driveways,
Right.
you're not gonna be very popular.
well, right now, getting in and out of there can hinder some of those businesses that are in there, because some people avoid that area. Or you have situations like Taco Bell, which occasionally has people spilling out into the roadway. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is find out where there's common solutions, and it's a little bit challenging. When we've looked at site plans here recently, let's say along 31 corridor, which we've had several of them go in, the cross-access is pretty easy. You're dealing with larger parcels, and you're able to make those connections, connecting parking lots. This is a lot more challenging, and we're not saying they have to do this, but what it does do is if we get some site plans in for this particular area, we can at least start having those conversations, because ultimately, a lot of these parking lots are not connected right now. That's one of the
Yeah.
parts, is doing some of those connections, and then ultimately seeing maybe if there can be some driveway consolidation as well. So that will be, but the idea of this is not a regulatory thing. It's not to say, yes, you must now do this. This is conceptual. This is say, if we were able to accomplish something like this, this would limit the amount of turning movements in and out of South Airport. That's one of the reasons why traffic tends to congest there, because as soon as somebody pulls out, slows the traffic down, backs it up. If you start limiting those where those are happening, it can make for a better traffic flow. There are, like Steve mentioned, we've shown some medians there that helps to calm the traffic a little bit as well, slow it down. Can ultimately lead to a better place, in my mind, ultimately better access to those businesses that are there.
Also,
Particularly.
It eliminates left turns, which is a big problem. Out of those driveways,
Mm-hmm.
turning left out of them.
And I think those businesses also benefit when they're connected a lot easier. I mean, if you're in one store and you want to get to another, and it's really easy when you can just drive that, cross-access lane down to the next one and,
Yep.
and get to it. So we wanted to actually share this with the road commission, and actually I said, we've talked about walking that stretch right there just to see what their thoughts are. And when I've seen access management plans before in other communities, and actually have worked on some, that this is they're actually they're typically more engineer-driven plans, but this is the level of detail where they actually get into, how do we consolidate driveways, create cross-access. Obviously, it requires the cooperation of property owners, and that's, the paramount to really making this. But the idea, again, is just to, hey, what if it looked like this? What would this create in terms of an environment for this commercial corridor?
Mm-hmm. And it could happen in, as Bob, you were alluding to, there's a few sort of levels to this. And if we wanted to consider any portion of something like this as like a master plan, there's cross-access, there's the driveway consolidation, and then the sidewalks themselves. Cross-access is seemingly something that's easiest to say as you develop. We want to encourage and require cross-access between parcels, and we want to encourage sidewalks to be constructed. The driveways, as you alluded to, would be tougher pill to swallow, and perhaps this is maybe overly ambitious, maybe not as many, but sort of figure out what is the best way to manage that. Because as John was saying, like the road commission's east-west corridor study, the number one thing was access management. So hopefully when we talk to them, they maybe have an idea on how they would prioritize some of these, and if there's anything that could be engineered like this, but to see what actually is feasible in this area, and what would it take in terms of policy alignment and things like that.
Well, on the joint access, I think that's a great idea, but that creates a problem for the other item about buildings facing the road and the parking in the back or side rather than the front, because I can show you several of them where the parking is out in front on that access road. And so that creates a problem too, depending on, especially if you're on a main highway.
Right.
It sounds like it's more of a dream to get the parking in the back, and maybe for new construction, that's a little easier to make happen, but when it's already existing, we gotta accept reality. And now, if somebody buys that junk and is gonna tear down the building and start over again, it'd be nice if we could persuade them to
If you're
put the
gonna
building in
put
front and the parking lot in the rear, but
if you're gonna put up a new business and you're gonna want your doors and stuff on front for the public to see it, they aren't gonna wanna park out and back, walk all the way around to get into your business either. I've been in that battle before. Matter of fact, I've been in court on that battle.
This isn't, just for your information, this is just something that we've kind of sketched up as for a conversation piece. This isn't anything we'd put in the master plan per se. There may be elements of this that talk about standards for, in greater detail in the plan about how to implement, cross-access or access management features into site plan review. It helps to strengthen the zoning ordinance so that when you're going through and doing a site plan review to say, look, these are some of the standards that we think should apply to this. And it's going to be a case-by-case basis and so forth, but it's getting a little bit ahead of it, just knowing the challenges of this particular corridor versus, let's say, like US 31 corridor.
so how would you envision proceeding after you're showing this to us, getting our reaction tonight? What would be next steps? You're gonna do the same thing with the road commission?
Yeah.
Is somebody gonna talk to the property owners at some point and get some ideas? They may like it, or they may hate it, or something in between.
Well, yeah, I think at this point, we're pretty far off from talking with them. We're just saying, does this even make any sense from a road management standpoint? We think from a land use, we have some of the requirements already in the zoning ordinance, we're trying to see, does this make sense to actually plan this out? And if so, then that's probably when we do some type of reach out to the property owners to see. I don't know, we're just kind of throwing it out for conversation at this point.
Molly?
It's, so tough to go back and fix it. And so I'm just wondering on, like, what's remaining of Hammond Road and the Hartman-Hammond crossing there. If we can be a little more proactive and be more detailed about what we'd like to see there. In those places in particular, and also this number 4 and number 3, on those maps. These are the kinds of things, or at least list something more than, if you have to park in the back, some way to consolidate those driveways and limited access.
I think on that one, we're working pretty good, because that's a newer emerging corridor, and there's already some of that working along fairly well. And knowing that that's a priority for particularly the Hammond corridor, to keep that limited access. Part of that is also the uses. So when you have dispersed commercial uses like this along a corridor, is a real challenge, because this is where the frequency of people that are coming here is for not just daily people in the community, but you have people coming from other areas inside to go shopping here and so forth, and come and visit these businesses. So it's this is kind of more related back to an older, kind of older suburban corridor with smaller lots in businesses in those on a smaller scale, versus where Hammond, I think we can manage. And again, it's industrial uses. Even multifamily is not going to be as intensive as having a bunch of commercial in there. So the placement of future land uses is really important, particularly when we look at that corridor going across the river to the west towards 31. Having the land use pattern on the west side of the river is really important. I think that's why it's been really helpful to kind of hold the line on the multifamily to the north side of Hartman, because I think that really, if we were to have that same type of development on the south side of Hartman and trying to do this bridge crossing right now, would escalate the challenges and the costs associated with making that connection over to 31 a lot higher. So.
Anybody got any other thoughts about what they saw in terms of the staff's vision there for? I like the idea. But as Molly pointed out, there's tons of challenges trying to fix what's already on the ground. And that was one of my first reactions. As bad as that looks from the current area, when you had the superimposed one, the sea of parking right there in the front is exactly what we're hoping to get rid of, but
Well,
it is what it is.
It can happen. Sometimes buildings do change and people
Yeah.
come in. We just like the building right to the north of there, the old bank building there, that's now Seven Brew, which is currently under construction right now. It does happen. So there are some changes. If that does happen, it allows some greater flexibility. And this is long-term, these types of things. This is not something that happens in a matter of years. This happens in a matter of probably a couple of decades. I think the bottom line is it's trying to take a proactive approach to a challenging area within our township and in really our region, because we know that South Airport is such an important east-west corridor, that this is a starting point to have that kind of conversation to making it better, even if it's incrementally. I mean, what the Shell station, that changeover right there and what was done is kind of shows that, that it can happen, at least on a, incremental basis.
Well, keep us posted with results of what happens when you talk to people.
Sure. The next section we have is the parking and sidewalks, which kind of complements the, we talked, I think it was back last month. No.
We had some draft.
Yeah, we were talking in terms of parks and trails.
Mhm.
And so now we're talking more parking and sidewalks, but the important piece in this is our non-motorized plan. So we have a couple of maps to show you. One is Steve conducted in a non-motorized transportation system. So this basically shows anywhere that we have sidewalks or bike paths or nature trails as well. Now, we didn't include all of the sidewalks that, there's a lot of internal sidewalk systems, like if you go to the mall or the crossings, and we didn't include all of those. These are ones that were either in parks or on the frontage along the roadways. So this kind of gives you a sense of what we have in place. And then coinciding with that is the actual plan that actually identifies where we want some future connections. So we took the current plan that we have actually in the master plan, and this is an instrumental piece because this supports the zoning ordinance, where if we have a developer coming in, and for instance, when they, Oak Leaf or Meadow Valley went in there up by North Long Lake Road in Zimmerman area, there was that connection through that property between North Long Lake Road and Zimmerman as a bike path. And with them going through the PUD process, we didn't have any issues with them in terms of requiring. We're saying, we'd like to have a non-motorized connection through your property, and they're like, sure. That wasn't a battle with them, which was really nice. It helped having it here because ultimately it's part of a piece why it's connecting the high school down to Zimmerman. Eventually we have a on-the-road route over to Wyatt and connecting to the Silver Lake bike path, where they could also get to the middle school and the YMCA and so forth. So having these pieces in place as an overall plan helps. It helps determine whether there's going to be a bike path out front or a sidewalk. In some cases, we've sidewalks which we've provided those in areas where there's typically going to be more commercial or maybe residential, not maybe a major corridor, where we thought a 6 foot wide concrete sidewalk works. In some cases, we're looking where they're more of a major corridor, we're looking at the 10-foot wide bike path, because those tend to have potentially more use and ultimately have longer connections to maybe areas outside of the township.
Steve, I think the trail or path west of Olson's, that's purple as a shared use pathway.
Oh.
Shouldn't that really be more a nature trail?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Okay. Good catch.
I think this is consistent with all of the input that the Parks Commission has had on trails and parks associated issues. So I'm very glad to see that. Because they probably would beat me if they found out that it wasn't consistent.
Yeah, we kind of have, this really ties the Parks and Rec master plan to the overall township master plan together, is particularly the non-motorized, whether it's a trail going through our parks or connecting our parks together, or something going along the roadway with the bike path.
And as everybody looks at the plan, the Parks Commission recognized that some of these were stretches, some of these connecting trails and new trails, because they follow routes that would require use of some echo for some reason. Just in the same way that some of the connecting roads might be a reach. But I think it's good to lay those down and demonstrate the township's desire to make those connections, even if it takes a while.
And we've been working on a lot of site plans that have come in front of us. We are requiring it, and this is what we point to first. And because we'll get this same comment every time, oh, where does it go? There's nothing it's going to connect to. And we're like, It will in time. As a matter of fact, we've had 2 locations right on West Front Street where one business is doing improvements and we're requiring a sidewalk, and they're like, well, where's it gonna go to? It's not connecting anywhere. Well, it's one away from connecting to a sidewalk to Munson Medical Center, but it just so happens right after they put their application in, their neighbor right next door to them also put in an application. So actually, they're gonna be installing the sidewalk together, saving cost. But again, it's those pieces. We have a lot of investment happening in Garfield Township. And so these pieces are going in bit by bit, and we are starting to make some connections.
Good. Any other comments on this one, anybody?
So the next part is really kind of the water sewer part. We've provided some maps. I think when as Molly mentioned, Jennifer Graham, the township engineer, did I thought a really good presentation last night in front of the township board about the need to invest in the water system. It really has provided us a good understanding. We look at the water system and we just say access to the water. Behind the scenes are, where are tanks placed, where are pressure reducing valves placed, where are booster stations needed, where are these water districts so that they can maintain a level of volume and service as well as pressures and so forth. So that's something most of us don't really, see much of happening. So from our standpoint, what we just wanted to do in terms of showing the water and the sewer system is where is it currently, and we just did a buffer of about 300 feet roughly around. There is more to this system than meets the eyes. We don't, identify where the tanks are and so forth. I think from the average person in terms of development, they want to know where's that closest connection to my property should I develop. So I think from the master plan standpoint, this is really simplified and is just kind of show generally where these systems reach within our township. And to truly get the understanding of the breadth of the system is to really look into the water studies and the actual water main master plans and sanitary sewer master plans and all of that Gordy Fraser has developed for the township. So this is kind of just high level showing where our systems extend to currently.
Should we also be looking at what we'd like to see as an extension? Just the same way we did the roads, the same way we're doing the trails and bike paths and everything else. There are areas like that property behind Sam's. Well, we know we're probably going to be extending up into there in order for them to be able to develop. So if it's on a map, I'm always talking about let's clean up the stuff around Silver Lake, water and sewer. The water's not good in a lot of places, and the sewer's not good in a lot of places. There's a little neighborhood across from the junior high that's about 2 blocks. They don't have water. They have wells. Those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think that would be excellent. We have not shared this with Jennifer yet. We figured we'd kind of throw it out to you guys first, but that's something that we can talk with her and support some of the things that are, that she knows where some of those areas that we like to get served.
Yeah.
What about the area down towards where the Olsons are talking about developing? Wouldn't that water need to go further south to deal with that? So that might be another one that can be shown as a
It could be shown
future what
that,
if.
The township doesn't really usually pay for those, especially with commercial or industrial. Those are things that the developer needs to put in, but still having it, we'd like to see this in the same way we'd like to see the roads, we'd like to see things.
We might, I think, kind of maybe identify, like, I think this we would probably maybe just keep this as kind of an inventory map, but then maybe show another one in, like, maybe some kind of blob map of areas we would like to see
Yeah.
served in the future. Can be very, again, high level conceptual and, but yeah, like Molly mentioned, this system is really developed by the ratepayers of both the sanitary sewer and the municipal water system, and how it's developed. Going forward, it's typically what happens. The developers will cover that cost to extend the system and provide service to whatever businesses they may develop there, or if they sell it off to homes that are developed on that site as well.
But they really wouldn't have to, just looking at the piece behind Sam's, because it's so big. If they just went with 1 house per acre or whatever, they could do wells and septic systems.
That's true. It doesn't require them to connect if, you know, they couldn't do well and septic as well.
Yeah. But if they know that we'd like to see that,
Yeah,
Yep.
unless there was a policy in place.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it kind of shows that we would like to see it, because there's, you know, I think there's a lot of value to this system in terms of what it provides in terms of quality of life and reliability for having these services.
John, Steve, does this include the extension out to Black Bear on Cedar Run? Is that included on
This
there?
does not, I believe.
It
This
does
is,
not.
So this is current then?
Yeah, that's under construction, so this is the latest that we got from Gordy Frazier, and I think they're supposed to wrap up construction on that next month.
So it'd be extended obviously out
Yep.
farther into the
Yeah.
township, yeah.
This is quite old. There's that loop that's up in the crown. It's about 4 years ago, and it's not on here yet, so it is a little.
Oh, right,
aged.
yeah,
yeah, I'll double check with,
yeah,
I have a GIS contact at Gordy Fraser too, see if they have a more recent layer than this.
yeah.
Wondering if it might be useful to add Kings Court, but indicated on both, because that has water and sewer, it's just private, it's not township.
Right, same thing with Meadow Lane, they have a private system.
Right.
So maybe we could at least identify those with private systems.
Different color?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it'd be useful, because when you look at it, you're like, oh man, there's a lot of streets there that don't look, and then you look at it, and it's like, no, it would have water and sewer, it's just private. This is good stuff.
and really the objectives here in the master plan is just support the investment into the water and sewer systems that we have in Garfield Township, and understanding the relationship between these systems and future land use. So certainly, if we are identifying areas that will be serviced by water and sewer, does that mean we're anticipating those could be higher density? Is something that we can consider at that time. So for instance, if we did, let's say, anticipate extending to that area behind Sam's Club, right now we have it 1 to 3 units an acre. Maybe that could be something more higher density, near to the future. You know, still single family, but maybe something, you know, smaller lots as opposed to, you know, what that would propose under the current zoning.
Well, that's in our zoning ordinance. If our minimum lot size is, without a water and sewer, it's 20,000 or a half acre. And then with water and sewer, it drops it to 15,000. So we've already
Right.
got that in our ordinance. So
Right.
that's, so really a developer on that large he would go from 2 units an acre to 3 if you had water and sewer, would be basically the reason to run it.
It's true.
Would that give them a potential of raising the density as well? If they came in with a PUD or something else and they wanted apartments or some other thing on part of it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the advantage of the PUD process, is to mix building types, densities, so it's kind of all planned out.
Other thoughts or comments on this one? Looking good.
The last part we just have is kind of stormwater, which mentioned is, we have a stormwater ordinance. And we do require stormwater management to be on parcels as they're developed. We've noticed more recently the interest in doing stormwater management systems that are underneath parking lots and so forth, maximizing the build out on some of these properties as opposed to retention basins, or sometimes a combination. But certainly all those, whether it's how those systems are developed, there are different best practices that are low impact. Stormwater management systems such as permeable pavement, rain gardens, those types of things. Certainly the impact on water quality. The township's done a very good job with the setbacks from whether it's wetlands or streams. And then most recently, we adjusted that for snow storage as well, to being away from wetland areas and that type of thing. So this is just to recognize those efforts. Our ordinance has got a lot of different options for people in both the zoning ordinance. I do know one of the things we do have on our to-do list is to update our stormwater ordinance. So that's something that we'll certainly want to be doing in the future. We work a lot with Gordy Fraser. Jennifer's does a lot in terms, she does all the stormwater reviews as part of your site plans, as you know. So it's important for us to keep that working relationship with them and having those reviews done on developments.
Anybody with any thoughts or comments on stormwater? Any more you guys want to talk about on this report?
I think that's it.
Okay. A lot of good ideas in there. All right, we'll move along. Next item is Planning Department Report 2023-60. More master plan update work, and this is to talk about the community engagement and outreach.
Yes, we talked a little bit about this last month, and now we're just coming back with some little bit more details to what we're thinking of getting some additional community engagement related to our master plan. As we mentioned before, we did a random sample community survey last year that we got a lot of response from, and was able to kind of gauge where residents are on various issues related to land use and development. And this is to supplement that to some degree. This is definitely not as scientific, but it's really kind of these public events, which would be located at various places around the community, are really to get feedback on specific development types and locations of those developments. Increases awareness about the master plan, to let people know that in Garfield Township we're updating our master plan. Most people probably don't even know what a master plan is, but it's something to get that kind of word out there. And then also just some broader feedback from people we may have not heard from, whether they're visitors to the township or renters and so forth. We've talked a little bit internally in our office about what would really be the type of event, what would it look like. And I think what Steve and I really both agreed on that works probably the easiest and best is to do something like a visual preference survey. Most people aren't really going to be comfortable with looking at maps and those types of things. Their orientation is not there unless they have a GPS voice that's telling them where to go. People probably don't really look at maps. So in terms of images, so if we were to show different types of development, let's say we're talking about starter homes, showing small homes on small lots, what does that look like? What does accessory dwelling units showing that image, maybe a couple different versions of it. And just saying, what, kind of gauging their preference. When we did the Barlow Garfield neighborhood plan, we did the same thing. We showed, I think about 20 different images or so. And I think we kind of gave people kind of they had 3 options of like thumbs up, thumbs down, or something in the middle or something like that. But basically, that's what we would be doing, is just trying to gauge from them what are their feelings about it, what are their responses, comments, and so forth. But having different images of different development types is kind of what we're looking at.
It's actually in the back of the master plan, because it was part of Barlow Garfield. So if you have your copy of your master plan with you, it's available in there.
But those comments are what we found is to be most productive in terms of having that communication and dialogue with people and kind of getting what their response are. Again, this is not scientific, but it kind of gives us another sense of what the feelings are about, or responses, or preferences to different types of development. I think we could do it. We would probably have at least, depending on how many people we have there to help with it, but if it's just, let's say the 2 of us, we would have a couple easels set up. It requires a little bit of one-on-one conversation. So it's not something that moves really quickly, but we could have maybe a couple of sheets of paper on that easel that would have not a lot of images, but just a few different images that would show, what do people, do they like this? Do they don't like that? It's kind of simple as that. We could also look at corridors, maybe showing some, the Hartman-Hammond corridor. What would that look like if we showed some preferences? We could say, this is what we're thinking about that particular corridor. Does that look good to you? Simple as that. When we do this, we're kind of looking at this as kind of more towards the latter part of the summer. We talked about some locations. We thought maybe at least 3. We mentioned this before about having one like at the dog park at Silver Lake would be good. We've talked as well as we did last month about maybe one of the community clubhouses at one of the apartment complexes or senior living facilities. And then maybe like a retail store somewhere locally, if we could work with a local business to kind of have an opportunity maybe at their front door or whatever to and there could be some other locations that we could also identify.
Are you gonna spread the locations out so we got, different locations in the township? They're not next door neighbor type things?
Yeah, I mean, we thought at least 3 to start with, and maybe more depending on how they go. So,
I think the Silver Lake Dog Park is a good idea. Obviously, you're drawing from people from Garfield Township who are gonna probably go to that facility versus, parks for people from Long Lake or Green Lake Township or something, and have dog treats.
yeah.
If you're gonna be there, you have dog
There you
treats.
go.
One thought might be, if there's an event going on at the Commons area, an event where there's gonna be a lot of people, the Commons is kind of, a lot of people don't think of as Garfield Township, but you might get a better cross-section of people in the area there, if there's something going on. I don't know what you could piggyback on down there, but it's just a thought.
I think at a retail location, you're gonna get people, obviously, that are not from Garfield Township. They're gonna be from all locations, but still might be, you have a lot. The construction still go down there. Well, if you're thinking Meyer, that probably may not be a good place
Yeah, I
to do
don't-
that because
Yeah.
That'll be done here this week. They'll be all done. Well, not the road, though. The road will be all summer, so. The Meyer's done, though. The store.
Yeah, the store, I think is, I know they were trying
they're
to
still
wrap
working on
up.
the gas station though. The gas station's still closed.
Open tomorrow.
We were thinking
Friday,
maybe,
be open Friday.
I think Sparky's Diner, they're local, those are local
Okay.
people. That's, a lot of tourists and others don't really know about it.
Right.
Hmm?
It was just sold.
I know.
If you did a community clubhouse at an apartment complex, you're pretty well guaranteed you're gonna get Garfield residents at least.
right.
But will outside people that don't live in that complex feel comfortable about going to the event there?
Well, our thought is, I mean, we can advertise these, but not, I mean, the idea is to kind of go where people are gathered, so maybe at that point, it's really just talking to the people living in that apartment complex. And I think it's intended to just not necessarily be something where people are going to come to, but the idea is to kind of maybe if there are areas where people are already gathered, and we're, like Joe was mentioning, like if you go to an event, if we can kind of be a tag along to that, or if some, like the dog park, people are taking their dogs out there. So it's not necessarily something, I mean, while we'll make them known publicly, it's not necessarily something that we would envision people maybe making a special trip to go visit, although there certainly would always be welcome.
Do you want to mention to the rest of the commission, you guys, before the meeting, we're talking about maybe one of the schools. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I had experience in working in another community. It was a much smaller community than Garfield, but they did do a survey of seniors at the local school. They actually had 2 high schools, smaller high schools, but they did kind of abbreviated they did a community survey, but then did an abbreviated survey for the students, and we're able to kind of, since it's kind of the the future generation, residents, workers, business owners in the community, what is it that they're how would they like to see their community? And it worked out really good. One of the interesting questions that we asked on there is, where do they see themselves, 10 years out? A lot of them were, I'm getting out of the community. I'm headed out into the world. Some were like, I want to stay here and help with the family business or something like that. It's kind of interesting to hear their perspective. And one of their priorities is typically fast food. I'll tell you that. It's, that's, or those places where they can gather, But the interesting thing, though, is I think is that it's a different voice than what we're here when we send out, surveys to residents and homeowners. So it's something, I think the key to it is to finding the appropriate staff at the school that would be receptive to that. Typically, when you have like your, the government teachers, the ones that are teaching those classes and so forth, those ones will typically assist with that. And to make it a very simple survey, I think we did it through an online portal as well. So while there was a physical paper one, it was a lot easier where you could direct people to like SurveyMonkey or something like that, where they can just, use their phones or whatever.
Would staff, employees be involved in that too, or just students if you did the one at the school?
That it would just be targeted towards students and working with the teachers. And I don't know if they've done anything like this before. I don't know if any of the other communities, like maybe the city or anybody's worked with TCAPs on this, but.
I like the idea about showing images. I think that's really important. It seemed like that worked really well in your Barlow project, and I can't remember his name, but when we had some special presentation at a study session, and one of the renowned planners from down below,
Bob Gibbs.
Yeah,
Bob Gibb, apparently that's the sort of way he portrays these things, with a lot of visuals and like, don't like, and got a lot of interesting feedback that way. And it's it may color people's opinions. They may think I'm against something, but then if they see the images of it done right, they might think, that's okay.
Yeah.
Anybody got any other suggested locations where staff might want to try to hold these get-togethers?
Seems like a good approach as it is.
I think you've got a good suggestion, Bob. We ought to spread it around geographically in the township. We can't have them all in the same corner. That wouldn't go over very well.
Well, if you want to get, a variety of input, we got to get all corners of the
Yeah,
township. That's
agreed.
all.
There's obviously the community room at Village at Bay Ridge, senior complex, or also Village at Lafreniere. Guests or residents are about ready to move in there. Probably- It's certainly by the July, September timeframe.
Right, right.
Well, we've got a couple more meetings between now and then too. I suppose if you guys have other ideas you want to bounce around with us, feel free to do that.
Yeah, I think it would be relatively simple in terms of what we would, I mean, you don't want to take people's a lot of time, plus we want to talk to a lot of different people. So I think concept-wise, if we can narrow it down to maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 concepts, like what do you think of this or something like that, and then allow to get their feedback, and then obviously leave it open-ended for any other things they always want to talk about. We're here to, talk with them about it.
I think we're gonna be more successful, where people aren't racing in. I mean, if you're grocery shopping, you're getting in there and you're getting out of there.
Right.
Well, if you're,
What are you collecting
if you're at the
for?
dog park, you
Relax.
let your dog run a little bit, and you've got time to chat, So, and school, I think if you let those government teachers or civics or whatever, know ahead of time, you might be able to build a whole unit around planning and how that's important to a community and all of that kind of stuff. You're limited to probably September. now.
Yeah, I think at
You're
this-
not doing anything now, so.
Yeah.
Right.
Can't do it before.
Mhm. The other thing I was gonna say was, we did say, to promote them through the July, newsletter. So we do have to get that out sooner than later, and I think what we were thinking was, rather than like nail down the dates of all of them, more just in the newsletter, do a general, like, this is what the master plan process is, we wanna engage, we already have done some engagement, we did the community survey. But sort of like we did with the Commons design plan, we had a project website, just put, here's the project website for the master plan, follow this for updates, follow this for, here's what the community survey we already talked about and conducted was the results of that. Here's what planning commission has been discussing, kind of link to all of these things, and just build a project website and use it for promotion that way. But newsletter, at least to get something in there, because I know that's something that all of the property owners will get and a lot of people read. So that'll be a key promotion piece of it.
Well, if you could select, and the first one is going to be
Mm-hmm.
at the Botanic Garden or
Yeah.
wherever.
All right. Possibly dog park, since that's our own, that's the easiest one to set up.
Dog
It's our
park
own
is,
park
yeah.
property,
It's on
yeah.
our own, yeah.
guys wanna
That's the one
just
that
be
really makes,
outside.
and we know there's a lot of users there.
Yeah, is a common.
It's a very popular
place.
place,
Yes,
so
it
we know
is.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I like some of these. I had not thought of Sparky's Diner. That's an interesting one. The Commons is a good one to throw out there. Like, yeah. Village at Bay Ridge is a good one. Some good ones to explore.
If you do want to go to a grocery store, go to Olson's. I think you'd get
Yeah,
more
something
community
better.
people
Yeah.
than Myers.
Yeah.
Some- Okay.
Tom's.
Yeah, even Tom's.
Anything else you guys want to share with us, or you want to elicit from us about this idea?
Not at this time.
Anybody else got more suggestions or comments? All right, we'll move along. And next up on the agenda is new business. I don't see anything there on the agenda, so we're not doing anything else tonight, correct? Next item is public comment. Once again, the public has an invitation to come and tell us whatever you want to tell us, if you want to tell us anything, and you don't have to. All right, we'll close public comment. Next up is other business, not showing anything there. And then for next agenda, it looks like you've got several things for us. So these all still looking current?
Yeah, so we got Bermley Meadows, which we had the introduction last month, so public hearing for that. Public hearing for Ridge 45, combining those two developments into one SUP. Olson PUD is getting, you'll be getting the findings of fact, and that will then be moving forward to the Township Board for approval. 716 Boone Street is basically the, kind of the former location of where Mundo's used to be located there at Boone, at the corner of Boone and Woodmere. So we have a photography studio going in there, that's a special use permit, that's actually zoned industrial in that property, so that's why, and that's something we can talk to when we talk about
Yeah.
future land use and zoning, and some of the challenges that.
There's a
that-
kitchen there.
Village at Garfield is that's an introduction for a special use permit for an 80-unit apartment complex there at the northwest corner of Garfield and Hammond. So just down the street from the Beta site that's going under construction right now, there will be 80-unit complex that's going. That was part of the rezoning that went in, the rezoning went through a couple of years ago.
Yeah, last year it was
Last year.
Hammond Road Apartments rezoning when it came, it was named that, it didn't have a name for the project until now, so.
The conceptual review, that address is, you probably don't recognize the address, but you'll know the property when I mention it. And that's that, on McCray Hill, coming down 31, is that the old turnout area there.
The parking.
It's that property.
It's that property. Although the concept on there is not for development, the concept is, that property is zoned commercial office. So office commercial, so basically office. The land around it is all zoned R2 residential. So the consideration there is, would be allowed to downzone to R2 so it's congruent with the zoning of the property around it, so that if those were developed, they would be done together. So it's still not quite into conformance with the future land use map, but it is less intense and is more conforming to what's adjacent. So the, doesn't mean that the owner's gonna do that, but the owner will be here to kind of have that discussion with you for the conceptual review. And I don't know if there was anything else. I don't think that's it.
Yeah, we can't get the township to just buy that piece, huh?
Preview.
Since that's not master planned.
It's master plan as agriculture.
Right, so can we even do that?
You could potentially look at other factors,
Yeah.
seeing that it's surrounded by R2, limited buildability based on what it is as an isolated parcel. But
Plus, it puts it greater conformance with the master plan versus the office that is zoned now. So it's what we consider down zoning, so.
no.
Fair enough. Looks like that's gonna keep us pretty busy for our meeting.
Now you have to drink more coffee.
Any other business for the good of the order tonight?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
We're adjourned.